Good morning to all my connationals joining in from Mexico, and good evening to all the people accompanying us here in the UK. My name is Cristian Torres, and today it is my pleasure to welcome you to this exciting collaboration between the UK Mexican Art Society and the Center for Mexican Studies, UNAM-UK. On this occasion, we are delighted to have with us Dr. ANGELICA BAENA, who will talk about hierarchy and attire in Mesoamerican art. This lecture will be followed by a Q&A session, so feel free to write any question you have on the chat in the Zoom room or through our social media for those of you following us on Facebook. Before we begin with the event, let me tell you a little bit about our speaker. Dr. ANGELICA BAENA received her PhD in Mesoamerican Studies from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, specializing in Mesoamerican iconography. She taught at the Faculty of Higher Studies Acatlán, UNAM, for 6 years. She has published several articles regarding pre-Hispanic codices and Mexica religion. She has published academic articles in academic journals and books, and also she has participated as a speaker in several international academic meetings in Mexico, Peru, Argentina, Spain, England, and Poland. So without further ado, we welcome you, Dr. ANGELICA BAENA, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christian, and thank you, everybody. I really appreciate that you join us today. This is the last session that I will give for this big course that the UK Mexican Art Society and the UNAM United Kingdom have prepared for you during this year. And basically, what I would like to show you, I will talk about the hierarchy and attire in Mesoamerican art, but particularly, I will give examples of the attire and attributes in the divinatory codices. These kind of documents are my specialty and my passion. And I want to share with you some of the complexities that we find when we analyze the clothing, particularly into the gods that appear in this codex. Something that is very important to point out is that for us, the clothes are something that, yes, it's a matter of status, it's a social hierarchy and division, but as we will see in the examples that I will show you today, in Mesoamerica, clothing is more than that. It implicates having like the attributes of the gods when you wear the clothes. Sometimes the clothes define a deity, and sometimes is the clothing a weapon or something more than just status and hierarchy. And before I begin to show my presentation, I just want to share with you a short story that maybe you all know about the Tecolote de Quetzal or Quetzaltecolotl. Maybe some of you have some knowledge about it. It's supposed that during the war between the Spanish and the Mexica, at the end of the war, Cuauhtémoc, the last king of the Aztec Empire, was desperate to find a solution and win the battle and stop the invasion of the Spanish. So in order to achieve that, he decided to give a warrior the attire that were a Huizotl, and that attire was called the Quetzaltecolotl, or the owl with Quetzal. No, the Quetzal is a bird. So it was supposed that if you wear that attire, Huitzilopochtli will manifest, the power of Huitzilopochtli will manifest in that warrior, and they will be able to win the war. Unfortunately, we know the outcome, but this story is important in order to let you know and have a reflection about that the clothing or the attire was not just that. It could transform an individual into the power of the god, or the person could become the deity. So when we talk about the importance of the attire in this particular codex, we have to keep clear in mind that the attire and the attributes generate identities and generate agencies and powers into the persons that are wearing it. So to see the complexity of this situation, I want to show you 3 definitions that are manifest in the Nahua conception and are sometimes very complicated for us in our Western culture to understand, but I hope this presentation will promote some questions and we could think about the possible solutions to study this phenomenon. So first of all, we have the idea of the gods, and the god, as it has been translated by Molly Bassett in a very good analysis this researcher has done. She says that a god or a deity is not as we supposedly think in the Western culture. It has particularly 5 characteristics. For instance, has possession, so it possesses, for instance, water, or possess the fire, or some kind of element. It has the heat, the day, or the fortune, so it's associated with a calendar sign, and also has an occupation, is marvelous, is different, and is beloved. On the other hand, we have something called Ishiptla. Ishiptla is a very complex idea that the Mesoamerican people have, and this is an our world in this particular, but the Ishiptla, this concept is widespread in the region. And Ishiptla means that is the skin, the coverage, the representative, or the container. So when the Spanish arrived, they understood that the priests were like representatives of the deity. But the interesting part of it is that by wearing the clothes of a deity, you could transform and become the deity itself, because the clothing were the possessions, or the possessions of the characteristics of that deity. So an Ishiptla, or a person that is wearing the clothes, it becomes a vessel of the gods, and therefore it becomes the gods. So that is something very interesting. And also we have another concept that is the Nahuali, that most of you maybe have listened about. Nahuali normally is understood as an animal, like an animal double or companion that is linked to a person by birth. But in reality, Nahuali is something more complex than that. It implicates the change of a shape, a transfiguration, or a camouflage. And the Spanish, when they arrive and they begin to study the ideas of the thoughts of the Mesoamerican people, they used to think about the Nahuali as a witch, or as someone that was a sorcerer, or someone that was doing some kind of witchery. But in reality, the Nahuali is the capability of have an animal shape, change your shape, but it is not just an animal. You can adopt a vegetal, you could become a meteorological form. For instance, you could be associated, or your double could be a meteor, no? A mineral, for example, we have the god Tezcatlipoca, that in some ways he's the obsidian, that's his property, his possession, so he can transform into obsidian, or an anthropomorphic form, like another twin, or also you could become like a monster, like something with a scaring appearance. So basically, these 3 concepts are very important because they interact with each other and they complement what a personality is. And obviously they give agency to different objects. So for instance, an object that has like some kind of elements of the attire, it could transform in the god itself. So based on these 3 concepts that are quite complex, I will show you how in the Mesoamerican Codex we can see these manifestations, this idea of the Teotl, the Ishiptla, and the Nahuali, and how they interact and transform each other, and how the Attire will give the attributes of the god, how it will demonstrate it. So basically, what we will see now is some examples based on the gods that we know and the human beings. In this kind of codex that I have exposed in another talks, the divinatory codex are codex to make really pronostics or diagnostics, no? So they were used by a priest called Tonalpoki, and they try to reveal the destiny of a person. So the human characters in reality are not very important, or they appear really as not individualized. So what we will see is that they represent more or less a social level or a character, a general character, is not an individual. Some of the hierarchy you could see by showing the human form is smaller, not really with an important attire, but the persons that are flanking this character in reality are the gods, and we can see all the complex attire that they have to demonstrate the power. For instance, here we have the representation of the god Tonatiuh, or the sun, and something that we can see here is that he has perforated the septum. He has a piercing in his nose, no? So something that is important to remark, you can see the person, the human, is not with a piercing. And it's interesting because the piercing, that for us is something quite common, no? Nowadays everybody could have a piercing, but in Mesoamerica was part of a process, was part of the transformation of a simple man to a better warrior, and sometimes obviously to a person from the elite, no, like the Tlatoani, for instance. So it was a very important ceremony to perform the septum, because it was a very keen social identifier. So it was a way to transform from a normal form to obviously a hierarchical person with a higher rank. So we have the male characters. We have some male characters appear in this codex, and as we can see, they appear in different ways I have shown. They appear naked, as we can see, so the hierarchy obviously is not very high. It's evident in this image from the Codex Borgia. It has an eye mask, a black eye mask that is particularly determinates properly what is a captive of war, and has this important, or this headdress that is created by 2 heron feathers. So that is called astacheli, and is a way to demonstrate that this person is a captive. It's smaller, it's not really important in the hierarchy. So we have other examples from other codex. In the Codex Borbónico, we have this person as well. It has, obviously, it's a colonial codex. It's a early colonial codex. So here we can see better what is the heron 2 feathers that the person have. He has an attire, but the most important thing is that he's associated with flags, and the flags are associated with the sacrifice that he will have, no? So when a character appears with this white flag, means that it will be sacrificed, and also is accompanied by 2 hearts. So it's a sacrificial victim. Here we have other example of sacrificial victims. As you can see, they are not individualized. They are just shown by their body, the white body that is covered in paint, the eye mask, the astacheli, or the heron feather headdress, and here they have in their hands like the image of a penis or a phallus that represents them as captives, or captives associated with the Huastec region. It's a particularly, it's like saying that these captives come from that region or are associated with that region. But as you can see, they are just not individualized. They are smaller. They are not showing any particular name. And also we have other representations of captivity, and it's here an example that I want to show you when we begin to play with these identities, strange identities that we can see in the codex. So here we have a captive that is naked, and also is he doesn't have a head. No, well, the head is not linked to the neck. He has his own head in his hands, and he has an axe. So it's very interesting, this image, because it's associated with a god, but not by the attire. It's associated by the concept, and it's associated with an image that appears during the nights that was a nocturnal act that was like a horrible vision. So sometimes people could be at home and suddenly they could listen a strange noise, and that noise, they go into the forest, they want to see what is happening, and it was a headless figure, a figure without a head, and that has the heart, the chest opening up and showing the heart. So in this image, we have that concept of the nocturnal acts by demonstrating us the self-decapitation. But as you can see, it's like a vision, it's not like a real character. Here is the same idea of self-decapitation, and it's as well, the person has his own head with the painting of the Tezcatlipoca, the flags of captive, and the body, the body completely in a bad, upside down, naked, and we can see that obviously the rank is not high, it's just like showing the idea of sacrifice. And there is a very strange image that, because normally in this kind of codex, we don't have images that show us a person in a frontal representation. Normally, as you can see, they are of profile. But in this image of the Codex Borgia, plate 33, appear a captive with his feathers, and appears just with a very simple mashlatl to cover his genitals, and is appearing in front. But in reality, he just wants to show us, or this image represents not a personalized person, is not an individual, it's just the concept of a sacrificial victim. The same we can see, for example, in the idea of a posteca. The posteca, when the long trade merchants that used to go all over Mesoamerica, carrying their bags with all the goods that they used to sell. So in the codex as well, they appear associated with calendral days. In this case, the day free dog, and appears carrying their bags, carrying their goods, as here we can see clearly in the Codex Florentino. But as you can see, it's just like a general representation of a person, is not individualized, and it's just showing us by the attire the kind of activity of the kind of trade that they used to perform. The priests are interesting because normally the priests appear like this one, from the Codex Borbonico, is a person offering a censer, has a censer, and is offering the smoke to the gods. Is a tlapichke, is a person that keeps the gods, is a person that is obviously associated with these offerings of the smoke, because the gods used to eat the smell as well, was a way to feed them by offering some kind of fragrances. But in the case of the image that we have in the superior image, we have here, as you can see, a difference. Is a priest, and this priest has a name. Normally, the priests in this kind of codex appear with black corporal painting. In this occasion, he doesn't appear that way, and appears with his name, because they are the persons, the first humans, according to the Historia de los Mexicanos por sus pinturas, that is a compilation of ancient stories, and they are the first priests. So that's the reason he appears with his name, and is called Zipactonal, and also is doing performing this important offering of the smoke to the goats, the scents, the smells, and he has a censer, and also he has here the very important bag, where has the copali, or the scents that they used to burn to offer to the gods, and he has a punch to obviously punch his body and offer blood. And here we have this lady that is old, and as well as we know that they are a couple, so in some ways there is an image that is personalized by the name of him, and she is Oshomoko, that is a woman that is in charge of creating omens or prophecies, reading the destiny by drawing corn. So they used to draw corn corn grains, and then they used to draw them in different things. For example, it could be in water, and depending how the corn will fall into the water or it floats, it will be the destiny or the situation that a person will have. So as you can see, this priest is personalized in this case by his name, but in general they are not personalized, and in this case it's just because they are the first persons that create the calendar according to Nahuatl myths. So that's the reason they appear bigger and appear in a much individualized section. But now we will see the problem with the gods and the concepts that I was telling you about. So we have the gods that are like this, they have a property, they have these possessions, they are beloved, they are marvelous, and they are also, they have like, they are related to some activity. And then we have the Shipla, when a priest decides to wear these clothes and become the gods. And we have the Nahuali, that is the animal form of, not just animal, but the form of a creature that is related to these gods. So the most famous example that I can think of is obviously Quetzalcoatl. As you can see, here appear as the feathered serpent. Here appears is a serpent, no, is a serpent with the feathers, and in this case is eating a person. This image is related to a omen, or is a mantic image, not to make a diagnostic and a prognostic of the future of a person. So we can see the god is the god as the serpent itself. But what happened when it appears as a anthropomorphic form? Well, we can see here that he appears as a human form, is sitting in a throne, and we can distinguish him based on his attire. He has a black body that is related to the priesthood, as I mentioned, because the priest, according to Fray Diego Duran, used to have a black corporal painting, and sometimes this black corporal painting was made of different kind of substance. It was a very interesting combination of substance based on creatures, for example, the poison of a particular kind of spider, etc. So they could get into some kind of trance and perform a better ritual and better communication with the gods and transfer into the gods. So in this case, that's the reason he has his black body. Quetzalcoatl is the patron deity of the priest or the priesthood. He appears with a tricolor facial painting, with a shell, and also with an earplug of cotton, and is like curved cotton earplug. No, so we have him here represented as the god, is the god Quetzalcoatl, assuming an identity of a human or an anthropomorphic form. But also we can see in this image from the Codex Borbónico, here is a man is not sitting in the throne, is the same, as you can see, the shell. He has the same kind of facial painting, appears with a captive, appears with his shell. But what is very interesting is that he's appearing standing up and is not in his throne. So that makes us think, or is a possibility that he is a person, a priest, wearing the attire of the god and becoming the god. So we can see that it's beginning to get complicated, and it's beginning to be the no distinction between a person wearing the clothing and the gods. And we will see that examples more clearly in the next image. Well, here is the same god transforming himself into the wind. So you can see that in Mesoamerica, by adding elements, you are adding identities. So by adding things into your clothing, by adding elements of clothes, different clothes, you will add a new personality, a new identity. In this case, we can see the shell, we can see the cotton earring, and we can see the painting, but he's wearing this mask, the mask of a dog, and also a blonde bird. It's a fake bird, no? So by adding that, he's adding the personality of the wind. He is assuming that he is the wind, and also by adding this kind of headdress, that is a Huastec headdress, he's adding this personality. He becomes the wind just by adding that. And we will see also that he will transform into different creatures by adding different things. So he is also the twin. He has an awali, so he has an animal form that is the xolotl. You have maybe listening about the xoloescuintli, the dog that it has like wiggles, and it looks like just like quite old, no, in some ways, because it has the wiggle. But we can see here that he has as well the shell, he has the earring, and he has a face of an animal, and we can see that he is the animal, no, is transforming into the animal, so he has an awali. And the same here, he appears properly as a creature called xolotl, or the twin, the double, the monster, by adding this element, no? He has the same elements, but he appears with claws and appears his face as the animal. So he's an awali, he is an animal form, an animal costume. And as we can see in the case of Quetzalcoatl and his transformations. Someone that is very interesting is Tezcatlipoca, the Smoky Mirror, because he is very well known, and we can distinguish him by the smoky mirror in his amputate leg. So he doesn't have a leg, he has the mirror, and here is the smoke. He has also his very specific facial painting that are two stripes, black stripes, and he is a pectoral called anahuatl that sometimes appears in distinguished colors that are red and white, but in this occasion it's easier to distinguish him obviously by his facial painting and his mirror smoking. But also we can see that he can transform itself in a creature. So here we can see that he is transforming himself into an animal by wearing, here we can see the concept of the Xiptla, or the concept of a person wearing a costume and becoming the god, in this case, Tezcatlipoca, but as the identity of a jaguar, because Tezcatlipoca is also like the jaguar that lives in the heart of the mountain. No? So how we know that here is a person wearing specific clothes and becoming the god? As you can see here, we have a hand, so we can know that it's a costume. So the jaguar is being used as is a costume of a jaguar, and a person is wearing that costume, and it has as well the smoking mirror, and he has here as well this kind of anahuatl, or this kind of iconographic element that Tezcatlipoca has, and we can see here the hand. So we know that it's a Xiptla, or it's a representative that is becoming the god by wearing that attire. No? Sometimes he can appear not with as a Xiptla, like a priest. He can appear just as the animal itself. In this case, we can see it's just a jaguar. It's not a person wearing any costume, it's just the animal itself. So that means that it's represented, that idea, that concept, that God as an awali, or as an animal form. So we can see the complexity of this representation. Is just the animal itself, it has been transformed, no, into the animal. And also we can see that the idea that they want to represent by showing the god as a jaguar is that he is the mountain, or the heart of the mountain. Here is the heart, and here is the mountain, and the mountain has arms. So that means that the mountain is, it was considered as all we know, as a living being, and the jaguar is the heart of the mountain because it lives inside the mountain and it protects the mountain and is associated with the god of the rain also, and there is Tlaloc and all the creatures that live in the mountain as a protector of the mountain, and also with the dark and the night, because obviously he lives in a cave in the mountain. And here we have the same god, the same idea of this Tezcatlipoca converted into the heart of the mountain, but here we have, you can see, a human form that is wearing a particular attires. The attire that has in common with Tezcatlipoca here is this element called a nahuatl, and he is wearing a fake beard, as well, and he is appearing as a human wearing the elements as a nishipla, and that's the way he is like a priest that represents or become the god by wearing the attires of that god. So we have another example of a goddess that is very important also. And I think before that, I want to show you the costume. See, the god is called, this is Tezcatlipoca too, but we know that it's Tezcatlipoca because it has the smoky mirror, the mirror and the smoke, the same anahuatl, the same form in his chest, and also we know that he has like an animal form or an animal double that was a bird called Huautle. Huautle is supposed that used to appear at night and used to make like a noise that was like a laugh. So because he was a trickster, he was a laughter, and he used to always laugh about the humans and its destiny, and could change the destiny of a person depending on his will. But obviously he could become that animal, or his Nahuali, his animal form was that animal. And here you can see that this god has his animal form, this Nahuali, but he is a priest that is wearing this animal costume. We can see his foot, so we know it's a costume, and is holding sacrificial spines. So we know that in reality is a person that has been characterized or has assumed the identity of the god by wearing this outfit. The same we have here with another bird. We have a person, is as well a bird associated with Tezcatlipoca, that normally Tezcatlipoca was as well associated with the turkey. You will say, why a turkey? Well, the turkey is associated with the rain. The rain is associated with lightning, and also is another Nahuali or another animal form of this god Tezcatlipoca. We know that it's Tezcatlipoca also again because we have here the smoking, the mirror, the smoke, and the same elements, but we know that is a person impersonating the god by wearing the costume. So the costume transforms this person into the god itself. And here we have another representation of the turkey called Chalchuktotolin, or the jade turkey, but here the animal itself is the animal. It's not a person with a costume, but what is very interesting is that they are all equivalent. So the value of these images, the animal, the Nahuali, the priest or the impersonator, the Xiptla wearing the costume, and the gods are equivalent. There is no difference. And here we have another image. This is from the Codex Tonalama Giovanni, is a colonial codex. As you can see, the painting is quite different, but we can see here the animal. Here it appears like the animal itself, like the Nahuali, and appears also with his element, that is the mirror and the smoke in the mirror. So as you can see, all these transformations are based on sometimes appearing the animal, sometimes appearing the god. The god appears normally as a big figure in a front, wearing all these the elements, all the costume, or sometimes you can see even the impersonator or the representative wearing the costume and transforming itself into the god. So that is not it was not a difference in that in the Mesoamerican terms between the god itself and the person wearing. When a person was wearing the outfit, it becomes the god, as we can see clearly in this codex. And my last example that I want to show you is the goddess Tlazolteotl, that it has been translated as the goddess of the field. That translation is interesting because, well, Tlazol means rubbish or filth, and Teotl, well, obviously we normally translate as God, but she is more than that, no? The Spanish obviously associated her with Venus. They thought that she was associated with all the sins, with all the lost with all the lusty things and sexual intercourse. And yes, she is associated with that, but more in terms of fertility. And also she was very important because she is associated with cotton. So the god itself, her property is the cotton, and also she's associated with the night, with the moon, and with activities, feminine activities. So we can see here the representation of her as the goddess. We can see her sitting in her throne and wearing the most specific characteristics of her costume are these nose ring that is in the form of a moon. She has also an earring that is made of cotton, a cotton headdress, and her mouth is painted in black because she used to be associated with the filth or the dirty things, but she used to eat it. She used to eat it in the sense that she used to cure the impurities of a person. So actually, there was a ritual where they have to confess one time in a life. According to Fray Bernardino de Sahagún, they have a person can confess once in a life all the problems, all the sins, all the bad things that they have done. And Tezcatlipoca and Tlazolteotl will be the persons that will listen to that confession and they will cure the person. They will be the goddess of curing diseases, and that's the reason she appears with the mouth black, because she cures the impurities, she eats the impurities, no? So here we see the goddess also in a more human form. She appears, as you can see here, naked, because as well from the chest is naked, is showing her breast, because also she is related to sexual activity, sexual intercourse, but in the sense of obviously fertility, no? And she has her black mouth. She has the cotton headdress and the cotton earring, and here we can see the moons. Here she has the nose earring of the moon, and in her skirt also is represented the moon. And the goddess itself, when she doesn't appear in an anthropomorphic form or the form of a human, she could appear as the cotton, because the property, what makes her the goddess, is this cotton with the moon. So the basic property of the goddess herself was this cotton with this association with the moon. Also, she can have an animal form. She can be, she could have the costume of the identity of an animal. In this case, we can see spiders. She was associated with the animals of the night, and she used to appear in the crossroads because she used to be in charge of the crossroads, and obviously she could give you diseases if you were behaving badly, no? So in this case, the spiders are appearing with her face, as we can see here is her characteristic moon nose piercing, and appears here. The facial painting changed because she can divide herself into 4 goddesses. So that's the reason there are different elements, and here appears another kind of spider, but or another kind of animal, but she is also a spider, and that's her Nahuali or her animal form. And also we can see the Ixiptla, the impersonators of the goddess, that are these persons dressed, wearing all the outfit of her, wearing the same kind of headdress of cotton, and wearing the moon as well in the nose. And they are performing a dance, and they are associated with rituals that are occurring in a temple related to Quetzalcoatl, as we can see here with the shell. But what is interesting is that it's more obvious that these persons are humans, but by wearing all these costumes, they are becoming the goddess, Tlazolteotl or Tlazolteteotl, and acquiring all the characteristics of her. So I just want to conclude this presentation by telling you that the attire in Mesoamerica is more complex than we think and we can understand in the Western world. It's not just about hierarchy, it's about transformation. So by wearing some specific clothes, you acquire a specific identity. That's the reason, for instance, that not everybody could have a piercing, and sometimes wearing some specific clothes or having a specific, for instance, stone that was jade was forbidden for the Masewaltin or for the working class, let's put it that way. Not just because it was a question of hierarchy, it was a question of a transformation and assuming identities. So by wearing a specific outfit, you will have more identities. And we can see that, for example, in the Tlatoani, among the Mexica, he has to go to a different kind of process and a different kind of rituals. He has to become very humble before he can go into power, and he will acquire particular outfits that will transform his identity. And he, in some ways, is becoming not just the one that talks for the gods, it's the god itself that is talking. No? So that is that really what I wanted to express today with these examples. And I actually want to let you know that in these complex divinatory codices, in reality, even though we can see the gods, the Ixiptla, the representative, and the Nahuali, in reality, they are identities that assume themselves, and it's still questionable how much importance they give to the difference. We obviously, they have terms for each manifestation of this, but in reality, as much as we know, in reality, the attire is not just an attire, and the Quetzaltecoatl, or of this story that I tell you about the emperor or the king Cuauhtemoc, trying to have like a sacred weapon with this warrior wearing the attire of a Huizotl that was related to Huitzilopochtli, and having all this power, really will tell us a lot about how the clothing was not just that, no, was something else, was something more important. And well, that's it. And thank you very much. I want really to thank you for your time. And also I want to thank Javier Calderon from the UK Mexican Art Society for holding this course and holding all the activities of the Mesoamerican cycle, and also to Ana Elena Treviño from UNAM and all the team of UNAM United Kingdom. And I'm open to all your questions.
Thank you very much, Angelica, for this fascinating presentation. Now we move on to the Q&A session. If you want to ask a question, you can write it on the chat. También les recuerdo que este es un evento bilingüe, entonces si quieren preguntar algo en español, pueden hacerlo. I do have some questions to warm up the room. Maybe I'll ask them first. And I'm very interested in these aspects that you mentioned about how clothes are more than status and hierarchy, and they are linked to identity. You spoke about the priests and the poshtecas and how attires generate agency. So I was wondering, do we know if there was a variation in the materials? I'm very interested in the material aspect of the thing, or the textiles that were used for each of these, as it were, classes that you talked about.
Yeah. Actually, well, it's not just the material itself. The materials are very important, and we have the examples of some minerals that are related to the god. But in the case of the cotton, as I show, the goddess Tlazolteotl, the cotton itself is like some kind of manifestation of her power. So obviously, by adding some elements, some kind of iconographic elements, obviously, like for example, the moons that I show, obviously you will create, in some way you will wave the god, no? So waving or creating the textiles, the clothing, also has that importance that you can create like the gods. The god itself, for example, the most important thing in the Mesoamerican religion was the god, but the god was kept in something called the sacred bundle or the Tlaquimiloli. So obviously the Spanish were very keen in destroying these bundles because they have the gods. So they were very curious to know what these bundles contain. And in some cases, the Spanish will find the bundle because the Mesoamerican people was very, very keen in preserving these bundles. But there are some examples that the bundle was found, and inside the bundle was just textiles, so some mineral and some minimal elements that created the identity of the god. So the Spanish, I suppose they wanted to find something like more like a sculpture, but in reality were elements basically plants, basically minerals, and part of clothing, all clothes that they found, that in some ways is supposed that, for example, with Huitzilopochtli, in some sources, he was a person and then become the god, no? So in the bundle, obviously you will have to, you will find, or what it was inside was part of this attire, and the attire will become the god in some ways.
Excellent, thank you very much. Rafael Ruiz asks, the symbolic, mythical, and ritual representation reached the extreme of the cosmogonic personification of Xipetotec in dressing the skin of the sacrificed to acquire his quality of warrior value. Would you like to comment about this?
Yeah, in some ways, obviously Xipetotec, and also as well Tlazolteotl with her identity as Ixcuina, they wear these elements, the skin of a sacrificial victim. So obviously, it's very interesting because in the ritual, in the feast that they perform in honor of Xipetotec, a priest has to get inside the skin of this sacrificial victim, and it will assume the identity. So this idea of wearing skins and wearing clothing and changing identity, this is a very good example. In the case of Xipetotec, also it has to do with the vegetation, because the skin of the victim represents the vegetation and how it change, no? So like represents the plants, the cycle of the plants, and how the nature regenerate itself, no? By wearing that skin, it's like the skin, the old skin represents like obviously the plants when they are dying, and then it's again the fertility. But the idea of wearing different kind of skins is not just in these sacrificial victims, that yes, it's part of that concept. It's in everything. So this idea of the double or the costume or the sharing identities is very, very common, very important, and they make a lot of games with this kind of concepts. So yes, Xipetotec will be an example of that, but also it has to do with the idea that he was the god of war, and also was related to the vegetation and the fertility, and that's the reason they wear this skin, no?
Thank you very much. Nimita Davi asks, can you please tell us a bit more about how color was used and how it was used to symbolize different things? The color? Yes.
Yeah, well, colors are very, very important, and also the color helps to change identity. For instance, in some ways, Tezcatlipoca, the god that I talk about, he has like different personalities. Actually, as well, he is Xipetotec, and he transformed into Xipetotec, or he Xipetotec also by changing his color. So Xipetotec is the red Tezcatlipoca. So just by changing the color in his representation, is talking about another element. And the colors also are related to the regions of the world. So that depends in different cultures. It's not a generalization in Mesoamerica that all the colors represent the same, but the colors are associated with the cardinal points. But one that is a color that is more or less in general, very universal, no, in its interpretation, will be the black, because the black was the color that was associated with the priest. So in different cultures, black was associated with the priest, and also the black is associated with the night and is associated with the divination. That's the reason it's a color that belongs in some ways among the Nahuatl, to Tezcatlipoca, because the black is the night, is the obsidian, and is the mirror, and is something that was used for divination. So that, but yes, the colors have a very important meaning, but there is not a general conception of the color in Mesoamerica. It will depend in the culture.
Excellent. Well, there are many people thanking you for the presentation. And Marisela says that since masks and dresses added elements to the person who wore them, were there special rules for their manufacture?
Yeah, that's very important. And yes, it was obviously when the manufacturing of the clothing and particularly also as well the piercings and all of these elements, yes, was important, and was a specialized trade in the case of obviously the attires of the gods. But also you could create the god and the elements of the god by simple things. For example, in the feast that they used to do monthly among the Mexica, that you could create the god by using amaranto. I don't know how to say amaranth in English, I think, or they create the god by creating an image of him with amaranth. So it could be very complex. It could be like a really complex process of creating the outfit of the obviously the gods or the king, that it will transform in the god. But also people could create agency and create these elements by creating attires of in very simple ways, no? For example, this amaranth figure, or also, for instance, you can create the gods themselves by using fragments of plants. Nowadays, even in some Indian groups, for instance, in Morelos, they believe in the aires or the airs that are like entities or entities that live there and are associated with the nature. So when they want to communicate with these entities that can give you diseases, so they want to communicate with these entities and cure the disease. So what they do is make cut paper in different forms, and they create the entities, and by creating the entities, they communicate with them and they interact with them. So it's a very interesting idea in Mesoamerica of creating the god, becoming the god. It's like all linked. So even though it was a specialization in creating some specific clothes and obviously working with a specific precious stones in particular, also normal people by ritual activity, particularly bloodletting and different following obviously the knowledge of a ritual specialist, they could generate this agency and these creatures or these elements by simple things. It didn't have to be very specific material. The ritual specialist could create that with simple elements.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any more questions? I think, well, one last thing I wanted to ask you before we conclude, because we're reaching our 1 hour limit. It seems that there is a lot of iconography coded and charged with meaning in the images that you showed us and what the representation means. So I was wondering how that knowledge was transmitted during pre-Hispanic and early colonial times, and how people could access that knowledge.
Yeah, that's a very important question. Thank you for asking that. Well, obviously, the way that we know about this, a lot of the perspective of the Indian people is thanks to the friars that arrived, and they obviously persecute the priest or the witch, the witches as they used to call them, or the sorcerers. But also they have a very important project to recover the culture of these groups in order to Christianize them. So a great source of information that we have is obviously the monumental work for Fray Bernardino de Sahagún and the Florentine Codex and Primeros Memoriales and different kind of priests or friars that recover these elements. They create this codex in order to explain what was happening, to eradicate it and to Christianize people. They use also people from the elite that they took the kids of the elite after the conquest. They educate them, they give them these Christian values or principles, but they ask them obviously to share their knowledge. And these young Indians, they have to go and interview the elderly, and that way they give you more information. Obviously, it's quite difficult because part of the information has this Christian view, and to know more or less more about it, apart from the Christian sources that the friars gave, something that is very important is the anthropology and ethnographic work. So by comparing what the chronic says and also which kind of beliefs the communities nowadays have, you can complement this idea, and you can see this idea of agency and this idea of creating the gods is still present in a lot of the Mesoamerican people living today.
Thank you so much. And one last question in Spanish. La confección de los trajes rituales tenía una especialidad en su manufactura de los artesanos que prefiguraban conocimientos taxonómicos de los motivos animales para representar.
Bueno, esa es una pregunta muy buena, y evidentemente pues yo imagino que pues sí, ¿no? Estaban obviamente en contacto con todos estos animales, pero más que nada lo que se buscaba era, o sea, no tanto, era más que nada el concepto, más que ser, digamos, como una cuestión de zoología precisa, de representar específicamente, era más que nada representar como el concepto del animal, que como vimos el jaguar no nada más era como, el jaguar implicaba que era el señor de la montaña, implicaba que estaba asociado con la noche. Entonces era, sí, obviamente representar el animal, pero no nada más era confeccionar, digamos, el disfraz. Muchas veces se utilizaba la piel del animal, entonces simplemente lo que se hacía, bueno, no simplemente, pues se utilizaba la piel del animal y se añadían elementos para, digamos, configurar la identidad completa de lo que se trataba de decir, ¿no? En el caso del ejemplo que puse, pues sería el corazón de la montaña o el tepeyolotl, ¿no? Pero en realidad también se utilizaban, no todo se hacía con elementos, también se utilizaban obviamente pues partes de animales, la piel de los animales, se utilizaba también plumas de aves, etcétera, ¿no?
Muchas gracias. Well, thank you very much for this fascinating talk, and it has been a pleasure to hear everything that you had to present. I would like to thank you, and on behalf of the Center for Mexican Studies, and of course our director, Dr. Ana Elena González Treviño, who couldn't be here, but who is really grateful with you and for the series of conferences you have given, and for all your work in disseminating topics related to Mesoamerican art and culture. So thank you very much for that, Angelica.
No, thank you.
And I would also like to take this opportunity to invite the audience to this Wednesday's closing conference on the second module of the cycle on Tlaloc, the Jaguar and the Serpent. And I would like to remind you that next month, the third module of this cycle would start, and this time the topic will be archistronomy. So feel free to register for this event. Thank you very much for accompanying us. That's it for us. And have a nice day for you in Mexico, and a nice evening for all of you in the UK.
Thank you very much.